At the center of the great forest, on an island in the sky, the crow, deer, and wolf clans have been training 3 fearsome warriors from infancy for one purpose: to protect and serve the goddess of Estra.
So how exactly are we going to do that? Protecting the goddess, I mean.
Fran lies down.
Leica can't answer because she's too busy sniffing both your butts.
Okay, back off, Wolf Clan.
This disturbs me, but not to worry, I will instantly repress it.
These are the guardians of the goddess. Leica, the tiefling paladin who hails from the wolf clan.
Nobody's touching one beautiful hair on the goddess's head as long as I'm around.
Corbin, a human druid from the crow clan.
Human! I'm a crow!
And Fran, a water genasi wizard of the deer clan.
So, is there a way to quit this job or what?
This unlikely trio will venture forth into an unfamiliar world without knowing who can be trusted against the powerful dark force stalking the steps of their goddess and threatening the future of their world. Tune in every second Monday to Dames and Dragons, a 5th edition D&D actual play podcast. See ya then!
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the podcast, I'm talking with game designers Alex and Scott about their upcoming project, Faiths of the Forgotten Realms, which will be available on the DM's Guild. They did a ton of research into the religion of the Forgotten Realms for this project, so we dive deep into the vast history and culture and lore around all of the religion in the Forgotten Realms. It is a really great conversation, and it helped me demystify a lot of the Forgotten Realms religion because their pantheon is enormous. Let us jump into our conversation with Alex and Scott. All right, everybody. Now I am here with 2 new voices to Tabletop Babble. It is super exciting to have you both here. Before we get started and dive in to religion in the Forgotten Realms, why don't we go around the table? Let me know who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop RPGs. Alex, let's start with you.
I'm Alex Clivenger. I've been playing D&D since high school. I've been doing homebrewing and stuff with the DM's Guild for almost exactly 1 year today, and I fell in love with it and went a little crazy and have been getting into as many different projects with as many different creators as possible.
Wow, I feel like I see your name all over the place. It's crazy that it is just a year. You have put out so much stuff. You're so prolific. So congratulations. That's huge. Awesome to have you here, Alex. A big admirer of your work. And Scott, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I'm Scott Bean, and I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons since the early 80s with AD&D 1. Fell in love with the game and stuck with it throughout the years as my main the game. And, I've created archetypes since then. I was DMing and created my own world and started publishing on the DM's Guild about 2 years ago. And I dove right in, got into the Forgotten Realms as the main setting, and started with archetypes, and I just kept going with that. And started solo, and then started branching out and reaching and connecting with others on Facebook, and got involved with several collaborative projects. And from there, it's just been trying to learn as much as I can and improve as I go.
That is really awesome to have you here as well, Scott. I've seen your work around, and it is really awesome that you are both here because we're going to talk a little bit about religion in the Forgotten Realms in general, because you all have just put out a supplement called Faiths of the Forgotten Realms. Well, I guess it's not out yet as of this recording, but it will be coming out soon, or might already be out. Do you know when you're going to put this out?
It should be out fairly soon. We're doing a final proofreading because when we first got this project going, it was for digital, and print on demand wasn't widely available, or really it's not widely available right now on the DM's Guild. And it's a pilot program that they have. And I reached out to one bookshelf and said, I think we should consider print options for this. And I received word back that we were a go on that. So I went ahead and transferred the layout from the digital version to the with their template for print on demand, and realized I had to redo it and had a few copy errors in. So we're doing a final proofreading and I expect to have that completed within the next couple of days. And then it's a matter of probably a few weeks to a month, I'm thinking, with by the time we get a physical copy and review that and see whether it's ready for publishing.
Well, let me just say, if ever there was a book worthy of being printed, it is this book. Alex, you reached out and you said, hey, we got this thing. I'd love to come talk about it. And then you sent me a copy of the product and described what was in it. I'm just going to start by saying this product has an index and it needs an index. No faith is left unturned in the Forgotten Realms. There are so many deities, and it is such a rich religious world that I really wanted to have you on to talk about that, because I've written Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. I have read a lot of source books. I've read a lot of novels in the Forgotten Realms, and I still couldn't tell you like a tenth of the deities in the Forgotten Realms because there are so many. In addition, this book, not only does it sort of break down all the deities and talk about them, it has domains. It has new paladin oaths. It's got tons of new spells. So it is a really great mix of a lot of mechanics and a lot of story that you all have done super, super deep dives into. Let's talk a little bit about your prep. Forgotten Realms is a world that already exists, and there's like information on the gods spread out through a bunch of different supplements and novels and things like that. What was the research process for this like? How did you decide, like, these are all the gods we need to focus on, and this is what we think the history and story is currently? Because for some of them, that the story gets crazy and ridiculous, and multiple people have held the title of this guy. Like, how did you piece this all together before you even started to write it?
In our original approach, when Scott first talked about the project, it was just, hey, I want to make some paladin oaths for a bunch of the different Forgotten Realms deities. That was it. That was the scope, and a bunch of people jumped on board. And then by the time it boiled down to just myself, Micah Watt, and Scott, we said, okay, there's only three of us. We're the ones who are dedicated to the project. We know we're gonna follow through this no matter what. So we ended up saying, okay, let's do Paladin Oath, let's do a Cleric Domain, let's do spells for each of these deities as well, because the material's out there. You just have to, you got to do the legwork on it. It's funny because we've got 50 deities in this book. We used the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide's list of what they call the Faerunian Pantheon, and that's got 48. And then we tacked on, I think it's Corellin and Moradin, which is an Elvish and a Dwarvish deity, respectively. So we've got, 200 pages. We've got 50 deities and all this other stuff. But there's still, there's a couple dozen, non-main deities, dwarves, halflings, elves, the drow specifically, orcs. They all have their own separate, pantheons that this book doesn't even get into. So we had to kind of decide, okay, we need to, at first we were toying with the idea of doing some of these other pantheons. I said, look, we can't have like a 500-page supplement, because there does come a point where you reach critical mass and it becomes too big. You can't price a supplement, that's 500 pages and get the balance between the work you put into it versus the ridiculous dump of content that you're putting out. So we kind of had to tone ourselves down a little bit, trying to kind of get our core list going. And most of our research material was older editions. So everything from like AD&D, there's Faiths and Avatars was probably our main one. And then some of these lesser known powers like Valkur, who's literally just a Northlander god of sailors, like a former mortal turns storm deity. I think he's in Powers and Pantheons. but there's a couple all in the same edition, all in the same stretch that kind of jumps around with a couple different pantheons and deities and things like that. And I'd say probably a good, honestly, a good 85% of the content in our supplement ended up being researched and inspired by those supplements, because the old editions have what I like to call, they're trying to prove to you that the Forgotten Realms exists, because no one's ever heard of any of this stuff before. So they spend a good 2-3 pages explaining every magic item, every deity. They have to establish what the lore of this stuff is. And if we're writing for 5th edition, we don't really need to do that. Like, this world has been established, the deities are established. If you want to go even deeper than we do in the supplement, there's ways out there that you can get into that. And 5th edition is a little bit more about it's a little bit more about giving you what you need and trusting that you'll run a good game with it, or that you'll play a good character with it. They don't need to info dump this exhaustive amount of crap on you. So we try to keep with that same approach, where we used this huge volume of material as inspiration, and we try to filter and kind of distill things down to their essence to kind of put them into the supplement, or interpret them into mechanics.
First of all, it sounds like there's going to be material for Faiths of the Forgotten Realms Part 2 and possibly 3 and 4. It sounds like there's a lot there, but there is so much here as well. Scott, it sounded like this started out as your idea. What made you want to do this?
In the past, it was just with paladins especially, it seemed to be so deeply tied to faith and alignment and things like that. And I've seen with some of the players of mine in 5th edition, they kind of were not embracing that. And I saw that the faiths were kind of briefly touched on with the 5th edition, and I wasn't sure that Wizards of the Coast was going to put out any deeper supplements in the near future. I'm not sure what they have planned, but I thought there would be a good opportunity to delve into that. And since I prefer a deeply immersive role-playing in my games, I thought it would be a good idea to add some detail and some background for the religions and faiths. So to kind of help dungeon masters and players create immersive campaigns for their characters, and have a lot of fun, running, using their imagination, tying in some of the material we have, or inspiring people to do more with their detail and their background and their characters. And I thought this would be a great supplement for that. And when I saw the scope of it, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to need some help with this, or it's going to be years before I could get something like this published. So I reached out on the Dungeon Masters Guild Creator Circle on Facebook, and I had quite a few people join up at first. But I think a lot of the people saw the scope of it, and it didn't really gain a lot of traction in there. I'm kind of new to project management, but Micah and Alex really helped out, and it ended up all three of us took on the workload, and really, I've been very impressed by the writer submissions from Alex and Micah, and I've been really happy about this project. I think it'll be a great supplement for those wishing to add that detail and the religion and deeply immersive role playing into the games.
Yeah, totally. We should mention Michael Watts, right, who had some audio trouble, so couldn't be on this podcast, but he's a big part of this as well and should get that shout out. So I definitely want to dive into the book and talk more about it, but I sort of want to talk about religion in the Forgotten Realms overall as well. My big burning question, right, is what makes religion in the Forgotten Realms unique? There's a lot of religions and a lot of D&D worlds. As you were going through this, did you all find anything that you were like, the Forgotten Realms really has this thing that seems to make it different or make it unique or is interesting about it that maybe isn't different or unique in some other places. You might be able to find it in some others. But like, what spoke to you about Forgotten Realms religions in particular? Let's start with you, Alex.
We ended up, for the supplement, we just figured, okay, we're in 5th edition, we're in like the 14, mid 1490s DR, or whatever the current date is. It's a little, they keep it intentionally vague a little bit. So we said, okay, we're gonna write this as though it is, current year with the setting. And looking back, there's a really rich history with these deities. And I think that 5e kind of has this advantage of it. Almost each edition feels like a little bit of a clean slate, as long as it kind of still respects the history. So being a full 5 editions in, I think they benefited a lot from being able to build this pantheon out based on things like the Sundering and the Time of Troubles, and there have been so many god wars and things like that have occurred with these pantheons, and we've gained and lost so many deities. It really it plays out like a mixture between an epic fantasy story and like a Greek tragedy, and I like that the deities are constant players in the world. Sometimes in some eras they'll be much more directly involved, and sometimes they'll be more hands off. But I think one of the things that people sometimes sell short in their games is the deities of the Forgotten Realms, and how they're constantly they're trying to push their pieces forward, or they're trying to kind of rope mortals into their circle, into trying to get people into their sphere of influence, and not just spread their mantra, but to kind of counteract each other's machinations throughout this entire world, this entire multiverse. And when you really embrace that aspect of it, as a player, but also as a DM, I think it opens up just all these resources for you. If you're struggling to come up with a story or a campaign idea, this stuff is right there. It's already made. They've spent decades just building this incredible mythos around these characters.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. The sort of living history, right, of the Forgotten Realms, the fact that things have happened since the setting launched to the gods many times, all these different world-shaking events surrounding the deities, definitely is one of the things that makes Forgotten Realms such an interesting place. Scott, what about you? What did you find interesting about Forgotten Realms religion?
I think Alex touched on it a bit, and about the deep, rich history, since it was out even before Dungeons and Dragons in the 60s, I believe. Ed Greenwood created it. So it has a long, deep, rich, immersive history. And when you look at it, it really helps forming and isolating the archetypes, and it made it easy to really get into detail and define the archetypes that that you can define your characters with. And it really has a fully detailed history and definition for each. So it made it well suited to conversion to the 5th edition, into the way it's formatted with the archetypes.
They have a lot of personality.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think it should be mentioned, while each deity has domains associated with it, you've kept the domains like, it isn't like the Tempest domain, right? Or the Oath of Tempest. You've kept them generic so people can use them in other settings as well, which is, so the book really has a lot of versatility in that. Like Tempest has the battle domain and the Oath of War, not the Tempest domain and the Oath of Tempest. So it really allows players to take what they can from this book. Like, you're still going to be able to use a lot of this book, even if you're not playing in the Forgotten Realms, which I think is pretty cool. Which again speaks to the versatility of 5th edition, and sort of the gods have this very specific story, but they also have this general appeal and accessibility that anybody is able to understand, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the motivations that I had for wanting to do this was, we mentioned this earlier about how, especially paladins, I started playing D&D with 3.5, and I had some friends who were constant paladin players. And one of the things that always drove me nuts about 3.5 was alignment restrictions. If you're a rogue, you can't be lawful. If you're a paladin, you have to be, lawful, and everyone expect, part like lawful good. And I think 5th edition is the only edition where a supplement like this so far has really been possible, where Wizards of the Coast understands when to make rules and when not to. And I really appreciate how much they've stepped back on alignment as a guideline and not something that they're supposed to restrict how players play. So it's possible to make a book stuffed full of neutral and good and evil and chaotic and lawful paladin oaths. Because something like that in 3.5, people's heads would explode. The system was just not originally built to allow that kind of possibility. But 5th edition, I just feel like everything's opened up so much more. It feels like I'd say it feels like they trust players and they trust DMs to successfully make their own stories, and they just want to give them the tools for that. And so with Forgotten Realms, faiths, I saw cleric players saying, I'm a cleric of blank deity, and trying to make a domain work. So in some, if it's better for some deities and it doesn't work so well for others. So one of our motivators with the project was just saying, hey, you know what? Stop struggling to make this work. Here's literally an oath or a domain for this deity. Go wild, have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing about the Forgotten Realms is that sometimes the gods have very niche domains, right? And so it is like, well, I guess I could use nature for this, but it really should be something else, right? It really should be like a different thing, especially for us who like to worship some less scrupulous deities. It's kind of like there's the death domain. But like, what about, I don't know, something cool like Talona, you have the toxin domain, right? And I think that's great because I don't know that death is exactly correct for her. It's not quite right, but toxin, oh man, diseases and poisons, that's like right up her alley, right? That's more than necromancy. It gets more specific than that. So I like to see that happening. Hey, people, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know this podcast is brought to you by Kobold Press. Kobold Press, the makers of fine 5th edition, Pathfinder, 13th Age, and more RPG products like the Tome of Beasts, the Midgard campaign setting, Deep Magic, and now the City of Brass. City of Brass is a new 5th edition booklet from the Warlock Patreon by Kobold Press. It brings the spirit of Arabian Nights to your table. City of Brass is a 5th edition D&D adventure by Al-Qadim setting designer Jeff Grubb. Locations and adventure hooks are by Richard Pett and Richard Green. The cover art is by Justine Jones. There are a ton of other awesome people who have contributed to this amazing booklet. City of Brass ships at the end of June or the start of July, but you need to be a Patreon supporter right now to go get a copy. So head on over to patreon.com/koboldpress, become a member of the Warlock Patreon. I am one. It is awesome. In addition to being able to have a shot at City of Brass, you've also got so many great things, tons of player options, tons of adventures, all kinds of good stuff is coming out of that Patreon from people many of them guests of this podcast. Go check it out. It will be incredible. All right, back to the show. So let me ask you this. If someone is new to FR and they want to get their mind around deities, one of the great things about it is there's this super rich history, but that's also can be a detriment to somebody new coming into the game, right? They can be like, oh man, it's like I could read pages upon pages about Helm, and if I wanted to, right? And I don't want to. I just want to be a cleric of Mystara, but look at all this history. how do I get started? How do I wrap my brain around it? Scott, what's a good way for somebody who's new to the Forgotten Realms to sort of start learning about the religion without it becoming overwhelming?
Well, we provided that deeper faith section, which Alex wrote. And I think that's a good starting point, because I think that should be, even at character generation, you look at the background, because it helps build a background story for your character. We provide tables in there that you could gain inspiration. Even if you don't use something from the table, it might inspire your imagination to create a little bit something about your background, about how you were introduced to the faith. And it provides a brief section about the holidays and things like that. And I would say just read through that. Maybe try the deeper faith section, because it's you don't get all the crunch that you get with the archetypes, and it just gives you a brief summary of each deity and their holidays and ceremonies and things like that. So I think that's a good place to start. Then there's also online information, wikis and stuff like that. You could search or Google or whatever, but that way you could just kind of pick and choose what you're interested in. But I think we formatted this book, I think, not to be too overwhelming. When we first made it, we didn't really have that deeper faith section. It was mostly just all crunch with archetypes. And I was like, we need to add even more flavor and get something to add more role playing and background details. So I reached out to Alex and said, hey, could you come up with something to help? So he could probably provide even good insight on that as well.
Alex, provide us that insight.
Oh no! I mean, I'd say for somebody who's brand new to Forgotten Realms and wants to get into the religious side of it, because there's so much there, writing material for this stuff, I treat the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide as kind of the primer, because the first section has just this really good brief. I mean, it's several pages, but there's this very brief overview of the world history, the way that magic works in the world. The world history section includes those major events, which usually revolve around deities, because they're real. I mean, they are the shakers and movers. They have a brief paragraph on the time of troubles, and then the spell plague, and the second sundering has a larger section. And writing this material, I wanted to treat the official 5e book as, okay, this is how you first get introduced to some of these deities. This is how you get introduced to the realms in general. And I didn't want to overlap that or like step on the toes of what Wizards has officially put out there, in focusing on the supplement and trying to come up with kind of new material to bring to 5th edition. Yeah, the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide doesn't quite have, the personal details for some of these deities. It just says, well, religion in the realms, you can worship different gods in different contexts. And the question is, well, how or why would you do that? What are you asking these deities for? Like, what are they there for? And so I think one of the major things is obviously physically, where do you go? What are their temples like? What are their major sites of worship? If there's a temple of one of these deities in your town, what kind of services or what kind of things are these people doing for you? What kind of events are they putting on? And so, making the deeper phase chapter, I try to do my best to double up and provide the kind of a detail on holidays and temples, so that if you're a follower of one of these deities, okay, I'm a worshiper of Chanti. That's one of like the most popular, widely loved deities in the realms. And if you're a cleric of Chanti, that these are her holidays and how important you are for the harvest and for planting, and how year round you have all these duties and the kind of things that your local temple will provide. And then as a DM, we're hoping that DMs are able to double up on this chapter and say, okay, well, I know, if I'm running a true Forgotten Realms game, I know what date it is, and I can say, oh, you're near this huge festival. I could have a whole adventure around this. I could have a whole side plot around something going on with these different religious events or ceremonies, or in some cases there can be some nasty rituals for some of these evil gods. So yeah, there was a lot of focus on trying to double up for DMs and for players. I feel like there's probably more that could have been included, but I didn't want to have a chapter any bigger than it already was. So
Sure. It reminded me of the monster manual in the sense that, like, you could go on and write a whole book about mind flayers, right? But they were like, here's the most important information about mind flayers for you to drop them into your game and play with them. And then, there's more information out there available if you want it. And, in Faiths of the Forgotten Realm 2, you might see us expand on this, right? Or that sort of thing. So that it just felt great. This whole Deeper Faiths section is good. It's got the background story options next to each deity's name. It's kind of got like what the followers of that deity are called, right? Is that the
yeah, I ended up including that randomly because I started going through all these supplements, and they don't do it quite so nicely. You'll just be reading and say, it's like, oh, Banite clergy. What? Oh, that's what you call someone? You call somebody who worships Bane a Banite? Okay, I didn't know that. Or some of these do not exactly roll off the tongue, like Azuthan, Shantian, Ballast, or Balin. You would never just happen to know these.
some of them are like Meliel is Sorlin, if you follow that deity.
Yeah, it has literally nothing to do with the name.
Yeah, I think they share like one letter, L, in the middle of the word. Totally. So this is just a super helpful section here, and it just really helps you quickly say like, okay, these are some major deities. This is who this is what I want to play. This is, and then you can sort of then go into the archetypes of the faith and sort of that section and pick your subclass that you want to go along with your paladin, or fighters, rogues, they all have religion too. It may not be expressed in their archetype, but they have that going for them, right? You might still want to pick a deity who your druid reveres, even if it doesn't affect their mechanics in play, because it's part of their story, which is cool. So let's dive into this now. How many subclasses are we talking about here? How many cleric domains and how many paladin oaths are we talking about?
A couple, just a few, maybe maybe 50 of each.
Wow.
or so.
Yeah. Huge. And I don't know if you all have some favorites you want to shout out. Let's shout them out right now. So what are some of your favorites from the book, Scott?
For me, I believe it's like a cleric of Azuth because, he's the Lord of Spells. And I've always liked running wizards or clerics, and I like having the option, or spellcasters in general, having that option to grab some arcane spells. And, it's just, I think it's the cleric of Azuth is a great archetype for me. I like the cleric of Tempest, or the Oath of Battle is really nice. I like that. I like the Red Knight Oath. I like Moradin, both those archetypes. And I like them all, really.
Yeah. There seems to be a lot of care put into these. Yeah.
There is. I went through and I did a lot of proofreading and editing, and it's pretty amazing. I've been really impressed with the submissions from Alex and Micah both, and the Lathander archetypes. Those are great too. There's so many. We actually did a Ranger and couple of druid archetypes too. So there's a little bit over 100. And we actually had to stop and say, wait a second here, because we had to rein in the scope or this book would get too large. And I think if we were going to put something else out, like you mentioned, there's other classes that are definitely these deities could represent. So there's so much more room for development.
Yeah, I think if we ever did a part two and we started picking out, some key non-human deities. I mean, I'm of course I'm especially thinking of like Bahamut, Tiamat. You got to hit, Lolth for the Drow pantheon, but I'm thinking even ones like, you get into some of the orc deities. Like, no, some of those are going to end up being, you might have a cleric domain or paladin oath, but it fits a lot just as well for, a barbarian of
Sure.
Roosh. You're channeling the spiritual power, but it's much more primal.
Absolutely, absolutely. What are some of your favorites, Alex, in here?
I like Loviatar, or not Loviatar, Ilmater. Very different deities. One of them is for torture, the other one is for self-sacrifice. So I got to make sure I don't mess those up. I like Ilmater's cleric domain a lot. He's a deity he's of martyrdom, self-sacrifice. And the cleric domain has a lot of things about using your channel divinity to heal someone for damage, and you take that damage in return. The other option is for channel, or that's not his channel divinity. That's his early option. Channel divinity is people around you getting better combat prowess while they're injured, but it goes away if you stop doing it or if they take healing. So this idea of that, like, you choose to continue suffering in exchange for blessings and things like that. I really like just the deities that offer those kinds of trade-offs and choices. I did the oath in the cleric domain for Eldath, who is a very tends to be a very peaceful, semi-pacifistic kind of goddess. And Ilmater is one of martyrdom, and those deities that make you kind of play something a little bit beyond optimizing your raw damage output, that make you kind of that embrace the personality of the deity and kind of make you think about these different choices that you're doing as a character. Those are definitely some of my favorites.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a fan of Ilmater. I think ever since I started playing and I learned his like favored weapon is the unarmed weapon. I think is really cool for a god of suffering, right? I also love the spells that y'all have put into this supplement. So there's some really, really cool. I don't know. I think every deity looks like has some couple of extra spells to go along with it. So this ended up being a massive spell supplement as well, which is also like no easy. Writing spells is no easy task, and it's really hard to do because I think you're trying to keep things within the domain. You're trying not to step on the toes of other spells. You're trying to keep them divine so that a cleric isn't suddenly also a wizard. And you all did a great job with this. And one of my complaints is that a lot of divine spells are kind of like, like they're fine. They all sort of feel like the same kind of holy or unholy flavor. You all have managed to make some really flavorful divine spells that fit like they really go with each archetype that gets them, which is really, really cool. So let's talk a little bit about the spells that are in here. Do you all know about how many spells there are?
Yeah, I believe there's 176, so it is a massive spell supplement.
Like that in itself is a massive DM's Guild supplement. What was writing these spells like? What was your design process for the different spells? And was it one of those things where you said we need at least 4 spells for everything, or was it there isn't a spell here for what we want to do, so we're going to make it? Like, how was the approach?
Well, I started out when I first started the project, I was like, well, I wanted mostly spells that will fit the domain granted spells or the oaths granted spells. So we kind of kept it within the 1st through 5th level range, or then it would be even more massive with the amount of spells. For the most part, we really went to like the faiths and avatars and previous supplements and looked at those and what were those deities' signature spells. I'm like, and we did some conversions, and I believe that Alex and Micah also created some of their own spells that were particularly tied to the deities' flavor. Yeah, and that was a massive editing project because we just look at that like anything else in the project. But I have quite a bit of experience with spells so far because I pitched in with the Elminster's Guide to Magic. I wrote over 150 spells in that. So we put these together, and we just try to stick with the domain and the flavor spells that's with each deity to add that to make it just more than just the archetype crunch. Create more options for players to, flesh out their character.
The thing about how it's difficult for us to count how many spells there are in here is because I think we made a conscious choice not to have a spells chapter. Like there's no single chapter in the book where these spells are all listed out. They're listed out alphabetically. It's sectioned out where you've got a deity, it's got their paladin oath, it's got their cleric domain, and then at the end of that deity section, it has the spells that are in their respective spell lists. Because I think the focus was that we're saying, okay, well, we're specifically converting a lot of these spells over from older editions that were and those editions specific to these deities, and we're doing this work to flesh out deity specific spells, for the domains and the oaths. So we didn't want to treat this as just another, chapter spell supplement where, some random character is gonna pull the spell out and go to their DM and say, hey, can I have this specific spell in my character? The point was trying to focus on building it as empowering, going back to the idea of specifically empowering playing a follower of a specific deity, rather than just making this any of the content in here feel generic, making it feel like we're focusing on enabling you as a player to play, a follower of Jergal or a follower of Malar or Myleki or anything like that. So makes it hard to keep track of where we ended up, but
it does, but it also helps. It helps those archetypes feel very special, because it's like, hey, nobody else is getting this cantrip. Nobody else is getting this spell that I get, and I'm getting it because of the faith. Like it makes it not only does it make the archetype feel special, it makes the deity feel special because only that deity can grant this spell, right? Nobody else can get it, which I really, really like. I think is a really cool way of doing things. And the other thing that I like is that I saw one of your spells is a summon spectator spell, like a spectator beholder, obviously. And the reason I love that is because in the monster manual, there's a thing where it says that a spectator is a lesser beholder summoned from another plane of existence. And I was like, how do we do that? And, I've always wondered, like, and you guys made it happen. And I am so joyful about it, that this is an option now for me. I'm also joyous that the sin domain is also an option for my evil clerics when I throw them at my players. Thank you very much for that. That was pretty awesome. So in addition here, there's a ton of art. How did you get the art? Who put all of this together? Who laid all of this out? It is a really beautiful supplement.
Oh, thanks. That was me. And yeah, I tried to go to Drive Through RPG and I started out looking at the DMs Guild creator resources, tried to draw as much as I can from that. But as I was laying it out, I would have certain areas with open space, especially at the end, mostly of the end of the deities entry. And I was like, I want the artwork to really match the theme that for each. So it took some time. It did take quite a bit of time. I had to search up and down through the listings on DriveThruRPG, reading all the license, what the license terms were and things like that, and choosing what I thought. And it was very difficult at times to find, just that piece of artwork that I thought that would fit well. And I think it, and of course, there was some risk involved because sometimes the DMs Guild, you never know how popular something's going to be. So, but I didn't want to limit myself so much on that. So I spent a little bit to try to make sure that the supplement was, I think, a good value for people that pick it up. So I was very critical on my editing and the proofreading and the inserting of the artwork. And at certain times, some artwork will have a transparent background and others won't. So I had to learn software also to do this. I was learning InDesign and also learning Photoshop to take away that white background so something will fit in, artwork would fit in without having, where it would integrate well with the background that we were using.
Whoa. And do you have a day job too, Scott?
Yeah, I do tech support for a software company, but I get to work from home, which is a good thing.
It's the dream. I also get to work from home. It is definitely the dream, but still like a job, still you got to put those hours in and everything. So this is incredible.
Yeah, there were some times where I did an all-nighter. I stayed up all night. I stayed up, I think at one point I stayed up for 48 hours, putting stuff together. And then it gets to the point where I'm like, this is just, I can't do this responsibly anymore. It's time to shut down, go to sleep.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it is a really, really nice looking supplement. It's you should be very proud. It's also filled with amazing material that is well organized and really easy to find exactly what you want. And what you want is all of this. So thank you all so much for bringing this on and for talking with me about religion in the Forgotten Realms and your supplement, Faiths of the Forgotten Realms. I think it is awesome. Is there anything else we should talk about before we wrap up?
It should be available on the DMs Guild within the next 30 days. We just we're doing our final proofing and get ready to submit that. And then we'll have to get a physical copy, review it, make sure that everything is, quality control on that and before it goes live. But keep a lookout for us on Twitter or on Facebook. I'm at Dragon Rock Games, and believe Alex has a Twitter and Mike as well. So just keep on the lookout, and this will be released. And I hope you like it.
Excellent. And we will definitely shout it out on the Tabletop Babble website and on all our social media channels as well. So before we go, let's find out, where can people find you, Scott?
At Dragon Rock Games on Twitter and Facebook.
Excellent. And where can people find you, Alex?
Probably the best place is on Twitter. I'm at Clivenger. And Micah, who couldn't be with us, is usually found at Pyromaniac Press on Twitter as well.
Awesome. And we will also have links to everybody's DMs Guild stuff over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com, so you can check out the other great work that y'all are putting out. Thank you both so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
You're welcome, and thank you for having us.
Well, that was a great conversation with Scott and Alex. It is going to be a great product. I am definitely going to be picking this up when it comes out on the DMs Guild. People, Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and you can help us grow by heading on over to iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review. It helps others find the show, and even if you're not listening through iTunes, odds are your podcatcher app uses iTunes algorithms to rate and recommend podcasts to others. So go create a free account, rate us, rate all the other podcasts you love. We will so appreciate it. And just as a bonus, if you leave us a 5-star review, I will read it out loud here on the show verbatim. You can make me say anything you want, like North Shore DM, with a review entitled Just Plain Good. North Shore DM says, I really like this podcast. The host and his guests tackle topics in a relatable way and provide heaps of good info about tabletop gaming. Thank you so much, North Shore DM, for your review. People, go leave us a review. Make me say anything you want. People, if you're interested in hearing about the game design stuff that I have going on, and there's still more awesome announcements to come this year, check me out on Twitter at James Introcaso or on my website, worldbuilderblog.com. Got some really, really fun stuff that's coming up. Can't wait to share it with you. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. It's okay to use miniatures to communicate what you want to do.
Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale.
A mysterious organization called the Sisters of Sorrow have swept up our 3 heroes, and it is up to Kara, Saye, and Arnadel to do battle with the forces of evil and financial destitution.
We shall battle with ancient lore.
Take them down with our sharp reflexes.
Hey, did you guys finish the last of the ale?
Venture Maidens is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition actual play podcast featuring a cast of 4 lifelong gamers.
Kara, not now. We're recording a podcast ad.
Right. Chop it with my axe.
For gold and glory.
We post our episodes every other Sunday. We've got monsters, treasure, role-playing, a cool plot, and some strange NPCs. Find the Venture Maidens podcast today on iTunes or wherever podcasts are free. Until then, venture away.